Welcome back to Wildlands Zoo. Last episode we built ourselves this wonderful cavern for our spectacle caiman. We got them into our South American building and out of the cramped reptile house that we had built for them previously. This week we still need to move their little dwarfy cousins over and give them pride of place in the middle of our big glass vivarium. We also need to look at getting this building ready to open, as right now it's earning the zoo no money and we are constantly having to put more funds into it but getting nothing back. On top of this, we were going to have quite a few exhibits within our South American building showing off the insects and the reptile life of the continent. So today we're going to focus on getting those integrated in, as well as doing a bit more tidying up and just getting it looking a little bit more presentable. Finally, at the end of the video we'll have a bit of an announcement that affects both Wildlands Zoo and planetzoo as a whole that it's worth sticking around to see. Before we begin, however, if you absolutely cannot wait to see this building in its final form, tap that like button. And although some of you jumped the gun last week, I would like you to put the crocodile in the comments below, all for the sake of engagement. Now with that all complete, let's jump on into our builds. Go, go, go. Details, details, details is the name of the game today, and we're going to start off by building in some sprinklers for the top of our rainforest habitat. And we're going to do that using these banner poles, which have got this lovely little round circular attachment on them. We're going to stretch them out across the length of the roof, and then we're going to run a couple of them down so that we cover the whole area. Once they are placed correctly, we will then pop in some of these signposts. Now these have that little nozzle on the end, which we're going to attach a mist effect to. That will give us a wonderful little sprinkler system. And the idea is that this would just come on every couple of hours, keep everything nice and moist and wet down. Now I did initially start out by placing one on every nozzle, and we had so much mist that my PC about cried, so I actually toned it back, and this is about 3 or 4, and I think it looks really nice. Adds a good couple of cloud cover to the top of the habitat. Now another addition that we can make to just increase a little bit more detailing is going to be heaters. Now only one of these in each bunch is actually turned on, so we're not using far too much power, but it will allow us to keep the heat within the habitats at the right temperature. And also in the lovely British weather, it means that when we get a ridiculously cold snow day, our poor tropical animal here are not freezing. Again, we're just using the habitat signpost poles for this because they work really well. Additionally, next up, we're going to pop in a HVAC system, and this is going to run across both the guest and the habitat area. And the idea here is this just recycles that air through, make sure that we're not getting too humid or too dry. And again, it's another bit of detailing. The idea is when you look up, this is meant to feel a very industrial building, and I think the more metal we can get in, the absolute better. Also, I had to take a section in the video here just to show you the little hinge bolts because you wouldn't see them otherwise. Now to wrap up our detailing, I'm going to run the pipes that we made last episode across the top of the habitat and into the backstage area. The inhabitants of this third habitat may be able to climb, so we're going to put a cage around it just to stop them getting into the pipes. Moving on now to the stairwell, we've covered it in flooring just like we did the other stairs, and we're just going to round them off with some planters on each side that will let the guests from the outside see the tropical plants and invite them in. It also allows us to cover up all of these joining areas where things tend to clip and overshow, and it's a great way when you're building of hiding mistakes. On the outside, we're going to build ourselves a little greenhouse entry, and we're going to use the classic glass for this. These little arch panes will make great look-in windows. However, we need to put glass in them because otherwise they're not windows. And then we're going to frame it up, make ourselves some sliding doors, just like we did on our entrance. Now this uses the modern glass, which has got this lovely little frame around it. Pop it into a little metal rail, and there we go. We've got ourselves some opening sliding doors. Going to pop a little bit of paint on the top of this glass now, turning it a nice lovely green just to match the surroundings. And then we're going to make a little planter on the front, which will leave a space to pop in a name for this building. Now, as with last episode, please pop your name suggestions down in the comments below. What we will do towards the end of the week after this video is released is we'll do a poll on our community post, and I want you all to vote on your favourite name ready for our showcase where this building is finally finished. Now, just to tidy up the edges where the patio meets the building, we're going to use these plaster imprinted bricks just to make some planting beds. And we'll come back and put plants on all of these later on. Moving on to the exhibits now, we want a couple of blocks. So I've got this block of 3 and there's also another one on the upper level. These are going to house tree frogs and snakes, but I want them to look like it's one big showcase habitat. And we're going to do that by cladding it all in some faux rock to start, and then using the faux tree root to break up the edges where the habitats meet, as well as add a bit more shape to it. So the idea is I don't mind it looking fake, I just don't want it to look square. And a lot of zoos do this. They use these very obviously fake plaster foam trees, and they're normally coloured the same colour as the rocks, but they just add a bit of visual interest and break up those sight lines. Now with them placed, we're going to colour them the same colour as the faux rocks, so they all sort of blend in together. Then we are going to build up the top so that it can make up an area for planting like we did in the otter episode. And we'll come back later on once we've done our planting to just add some more foliage and tie all these in, which you'll see in the ending cinematics. Jumping into the actual habitat itself, now the concept for this one, it's the only habitat in this building that doesn't have an outside area. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a riverbank. We're going to do that by dropping the level of the floor down, making these sort of sheer sides, adding a bit of texture, some grass, some mud, some sand. Then before we get onto the detailing, we're going to make our big showcase tree that's going to highlight this corner of our vivarium. Now this tree is using inspiration from a place in Barcelona, which I actually have plans to visit towards the end of the year, that has this very big indoor rainforest called the Cosmocaxia. I'm probably butchering the name of the place. It uses fake trees, fake strangler fig trees, which they've made by bringing these giant, what looks to be plastic trees together and covering them in all of these big long roots. We've done that a little bit here by popping the roots in and then changing the color of the faux tree to match them. And then we're going to extend those roots then underwater, as a big showcase of this habitat is that the water line runs all the way around it. So the guests will only ever see it from the water level. And we want those roots and that tree to really look like it's planted into the ground and has grown down below the waterline. Now when it comes to detailing the riverbank, those of you who have seen my Antara Park series will know my method. It's basically using these tropical rocks to give a soil texture, and then we're going to implement some aquatic trees just to add a bit more structure. They have a little bit more lining, a little bit more sharper edges. So we're going to do that by putting them vertically into the ground to give us a nice flat surface to overhang off of. And then equally, we will put one horizontally later on along the front of that soil texture and blend it in. And that just gives a bit of variation. Then we'll cap this all off with these mossy rocks just to give us a sort of ground level. And we'll accentuate this a little bit more later on when we do the next habitat, as that will then lead into this sort of looking like it's all one big place rather than separated by barriers. Now the hidden secret with these riverbank edges and making them look really good is to effectively not have any blank areas or not have any areas that are just one item. So we are going to use planting and roots again just to fill in some gaps and add a bit of visual interest. Now one thing that is worth keeping in mind, and this habitat will change slightly from how you see me build it here to how you see it in the cinematics, and that is that a lot of these roots and trees have quite a big impact on the habitat space. Now I knew this going in, however what I didn't realise was that the strangler roots actually are a lot bigger in their hitbox than what the model implies. So even though this habitat technically has far more space than these caiman could ever use, the original iteration, which you're seeing me build, doesn't actually have enough space for 2 caiman, which was a bit of a pain. So what I did off camera is I did go back and have a little bit of a tidy up, a little bit of a move around, and just get everything sorted. Moving on to planting, you've seen me do this many times. I just want to highlight the layering. So we are layering the hyacinths or water hyacinthia into the eelgrass, as well as using the periwinkle leaves as algae on the top of the water. We're also going to put a couple of feature plants, such as the temple plants, just to draw your eye. And the idea is that as we zoom out, you don't really see any areas that are completely bland. Then just add a little bit of highlights. We're going to use the pitcher plants with their very vibrant yellow-green, just as a bit of a highlight. We're going to float these on the water as well, just so it draws your eye around. To fill in some space, we're going to use the bromeliads and the banana plants. Again, just using very similar colour plants just to fill in the gaps. And then we're going to bring in some bigger plants along the back edge of the wall. This will just hide the viewpoint from one side to the other so that you start to notice it's more than one habitat. We don't really want that. Now, as we get into planting up our big faux tree, you may notice at one point a secondary tree turns up, and that's because once I'd done, I sort of looked at it and thought, we need something in the middle. But what I'm doing on the top of these is using ferns, and the idea would be is, although this is a fake tree, there is a high likelihood that a large amount of plantation would have been built on top, just to make it look like it's got live growth. And I really like how this turns out in the end, and it does work really well. This wasn't in the inspiration picture, but what it did was just add a little bit more green and height and lushness to the overall habitat. To finish off on these fake trees, we're also going to use the basket plants almost exclusively. These, when you stagger them out and just lift them up and down, move them side to side, they make this really big, lush, bulky growth of plant life. And I think it's probably the most natural thing I've added to any of my habitats so far, and it's definitely something I'm going to use again. Now, before we jump into the cinematics, just have a look at how lush and green this looks as we zoom out. Really happy with it. Let's see how it looks in all its glory once we've got the caiman inside. As we open the doors to our wonderful building, I am so happy how this turned out. It was a fairly shorter episode today just because there was a lot of detailing that went into it, and obviously the outskirts of our habitat were already built. However, I hope you can sort of see how much the extra little details bring to this build, and I can't wait to start bringing them into other areas of the zoo. One thing I do want to highlight is we finally have access and visibility of our otter tunnel. So the original plan of this was that as the otters go from their inner habitat to the outer habitat, you have this tunnel that goes behind the axolotl tanks, and it's a little river, and the water falls into the tank as it comes by, and it gives you that sort of predator prey or live forest feel. If we had fish, that's where they would be. Unfortunately, we don't, so the closest is going to be the axolotl here. Additionally, on top of that, I went a little bit crazy with the lighting. So as you can see here with some of these night shots, we've got some lovely lighting on the front of the building, and I really want to start using lighting more in my builds, so you'll probably see a lot more of them popping up. Really happy with how it all turned out. I realise there is still one habitat left to do. That's going to be in our next episode of Wildlands, as well as the outside landscaping of the surrounding area. Now, for those of you that have made it this far, onto the quick announcement. Those of you who follow planetzoo will be aware that they have just announced the Barnyard Animal DLC. As with the Eurasia DLC, I do intend to build a mini zoo. However, I want to keep it within our Wildlands Coltham house canon. It gives me the opportunity to build what was originally going to be Wildlands Zoo, and that is a British farm park. So for the next couple of episodes, we are going to pivot away and build that part. That will be starting next week, and then once that's complete, we will return and pick up where we left off with Wildlands. If you've been enjoying this series, I have no doubt you will equally enjoy that series, so do stick around for that. As mentioned, please pop your name ideas for this building down in the comments below, and then in about a week's time after this episode has been launched, I'll do a poll on our community tab for you all to vote on what you think is the best name. If you enjoyed the episode today, don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.